The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We're at the top of the hour here. We'll just give it a few more minutes before we get started. While we're waiting, can I get some thumbs up maybe let me know if the audio is working okay and everyone can hear me? All right. All right. Good morning, everyone. We can go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome to the April edition of the Cybersecurity Coordinator Forum. I am your host, Todd Pauley. I am the Deputy CISO here at the Texas Education Agency. And we hold this monthly webinar once a month for cybersecurity coordinators. Anyone that's sort of really interested in cybersecurity in general. So if you're ESC, whatnot, feel free to share this. I do have an update on that. We've kind of been directed that we're going to get rid of GoToMeeting. So we're transitioning to Zoom. So if please re-register here. I will send out a link to everyone that's in our database and GoToMeeting. I have over 1,000 registrants in there. And any given month here, we have 150, 200 around there that attend. So I'm not sure how many of those are old, but if you are interested in continuing to these, please do this. I think we'll probably transition to that next month. So please do that. And like I said, I will send out a registration email just as to help you if you didn't get it this morning. Agenda this morning, got some, talk about ISAL as we do every month, update on the SLCGP, some advisories, a couple updates, talk about the status of the cybersecurity initiative, and then we have our own cybersecurity operations team lead, Josh Olson, here to talk to us about browser security. So Texas ISAL, if you're not a member of the Texas ISAL and this is your first time hearing this spiel, please sign up. It's great for local information, cybersecurity around the state. DIR does a great job of keeping things up to date on this. They'll pass along updates from MSISAC and various other things that they may get in regarding cybersecurity news, vulnerabilities, that sort of thing. So it's a great resource. We also use the K-12 portion of that. So when you sign up, it'll ask you to select some organizations or the areas of interest. And so if you do the K-12 portion of that, if we get threat alerts that come in, reports that have IOCs that are kind of actionable, that we will share those through that vehicle. So please sign up with that. Updates on the state and local cybersecurity grant program, the SLCGP. So we have collected, I sit on that committee, so we have collected all of those proposals for the grants. I think it was somewhere around 200. They got filtered through with who was met the qualifications. I think we're a little bit under that. And so we've divided up into a couple groups. We're going to be reviewing those and we're going to have that done by end of June 22nd. I have no bearing over anything education related, so I have no conflicts of interest there. And so there'll be others that will be doing those. And then those will get sent to the governor's office to get approved and funded and however that works out. So Not sure exactly of how the process is going to work apart from the review, but we're in the review process, and so that is where we stand. Also, CISA sent out last week, I believe, solicitation for feedback on that, on the whole process from the federal level. So please go answer that. I think this might help moving forward if this happens again in the future, or how they take this grant program. So if you applied for the grant, even if you didn't, if you're interested, if you're a local entity, which you all are, please go fill out the survey. That'd be really helpful potentially for more cybersecurity funding. So cybersecurity advisories. So we had a pretty serious one that came through. I sent out an alert a week or so ago on this. So Palo Alto Networks. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are a few of you that are using Palo Alto Networks, specifically if you're using the Global Protect Gateway, which is the VPN portal. There is a vulnerability that allows unauthenticated user to, or exploited through this exploit, to inject malicious code as with administrative privileges. So definitely not something we want to mess around with. So yeah, if you are a Palo Alto Network customer and you have PAN-OS on your firewalls, please go update them. I think there is a version that they have released that negates this patch, or the vulnerability rather. And so go take advantage of that. I see a question in there about handouts from last month, and yes, I just deleted those. I'll put those in there in a second. I kind of got sidetracked and forgot. So when we get to the main presentation where Josh takes over, I will stick those in there. So give me just a minute and I'll do that. All right, moving on. Yeah, and there's a link there for Palo Alto. They've got the latest and greatest on this vulnerability. So please go take advantage and look at that if you are a customer. CISA also released last week, I believe it was, their malware next generation analysis tool. They opened that up to the general public. It was just available for federal agencies. And so now it's kind of, anyone that wants to utilize this, you can send them malicious files and they'll evaluate that. You do have to register with a login to be able to see the results of that. You can submit things anonymously if you want to do that, just for the greater good. But if you want to understand what's going on, if you have something that come through phishing or whatnot and you want to get it evaluated, you can definitely submit that. And so that's opened up. So there's a link there to the kind of that announcement and that resource. So if that's something you're at all interested in, please go look at that. Other similar things, like if you remember MSISAC, they have something similar where you could kind of malicious code analysis program, MCAP. That's very similar, but this is wide open now and maybe a little easier access. So this is something you need to kind of bolster your security department. Definitely check that out. Also from CISA and the feds, get.gov. So they announced that they released a document kind of helping people to get onboarded with .gov domain. Is this required? No, it's not required. But a few years ago, they opened up the .gov domain space to anyone that's in the U.S. that is a state, local, tribal territory, that sort of thing. So any government entity in the country can use the .gov. Why should you use .gov? One, it's free; they're not charging for it. The thing I'm going to put in the handouts in just a second here is the specifically related to elections, but that was the marketing ploy to kind of get this out. But I think it's just really overall good information. It's not specifically tied to elections, so definitely look at that if you're interested in that. I'm going to throw that in there right now. All right. Just going to put the other one in there too. All right, those are uploading, so we should be good. All right, updates on the local government incident reporting, so SB 271. So this changed as of September 1, reporting incidents through DIR for any kind of cybersecurity related incident, whether it involves student data or not, which previously was the onus for Texas Education Code 11.175 reporting requirements. So that kind of superseded that. So we're using that platform. A couple updates on that. They added a new field to indicate if you're submitting on the behalf of another organization. And if you answer yes, it will you required to input contact information for the submitter itself. So that's kind of a new field. They also added a new field to indicate if you would like consultation from DIR's cybersecurity incident response team. So if you're in the middle of something and this is kind of your reporting to let someone else know about that, and you want help and you need some guidance from that, the CERT team is definitely there. I've been on many of those calls. They do a really great job of kind of helping you get where you need to go, contact wise, and that sort of thing. So new field there to the reporting intake form. So just wanted to let you guys know that if you hadn't seen that somewhere else. Legislative update. So I've talked about this a few different months past. Kind of keeps coming up, so I thought I would mention it again if anyone's on here that hasn't heard this already. So HB 18 passed last session during the regular session, also called SCOPE. And so this has to do with social media and protection of minors with digital services. TEA released a TAA on this to the administrator addressed, if you didn't know what that was. So official documentation that goes to superintendents from TEA. So this was released, kind of some guidance on there. This is all that I'm aware of that TEA has released. Someone was asking if they had any specific filtering for social media or web in general. And I don't know, we have not endorsed anything like that. We just have these general suggestions and guidelines. So for anyone that's interested, this is the latest and greatest information on that. All right, little update on the initiative. Melinda took my place last month as I was off. Enjoyed a wonderful vacation, and here we are back. So this is some of the content, updates from that. If you're a new customer, please register. There's the link to our page that kind of has everything you need to know about the initiative itself. We are giving away EDR, 15,000 enrollment or less, and to 20% of that enrollment is the number. So if you have 15,000 enrollment students, you get 3,000 licenses for EDR. We definitely want to make sure that we cover all servers and staff devices. So please let us know if you have some exception for that and you're under that 15,000. Go through the process of signing up through the MSS portal. The two vendors there, CrowdStrike's on the one, and standard option is what most LEAs should use. I think the numbers are growing, so we definitely have people taking advantage of that. But if you haven't and you're on this call, and please do so sooner or later. We would like to continue this program, and I think the more participation we have, if we spend all the allocated money for this, we can make a good case for getting this resubmitted next year and getting this funded. So please take advantage of that. Security assessments were announced last month as well. So those are open. We already have, I believe, 9 that are signed up that have requested the cybersecurity assessment. So those are going to come on a first come, first served basis. There are kind of 3 tiers for that: a basic, intermediate, and advanced. And that has to do with the controls that those address and the questions in those questionnaires. So as they tie to those controls, basically for the reason of the 3, we didn't want to throw a full advanced assessment at someone that didn't need it. If they aren't developing software, they aren't doing many other things in like a smaller district environment, you don't need to go through that trouble and that hassle. Specifically, we don't want to give you zeros on things because it doesn't exist. So choose the right sized assessment based on kind of your structure. And the output for those are normally in the 0 through 5 range. 2.5 is kind of pretty average. So like just expectations and setting that forth. A 3 would be great across the board. You really got to spend some money and do some really heavy things to get a 5. So just keep that in mind with this assessment, but it'll definitely highlight things. The assessments are really great, and the outcome, the format of the report they send you, they've got some high impact things you can do to make a difference in your environment. So definitely it's worth doing if you have never done one of these before. And we're paying for it. So please go take advantage and sign up for those. Same process, signing up. And anyone is open for the assessments, not just the 15,000 limitation. Someone asked if we were going to up the 15,000 number for students for EDR. At this point, no. I think we're going to be able to spend based on kind of the trending stuff. But if something changes with that, then possibly yes. But the whole bucket is all these things combined. So it depends on how these security assessments shake out. So if people don't take advantage of that, we can reevaluate that at some point in time. But that's kind of how that's working right now. Upcoming stuff. Education service centers are getting staff to help with a certain, the rollout and these kind of priorities that we've determined here: multi-factor authentication, kind of security best practices, email security. If you haven't already done some of this already, Yahoo and Google implemented some stricter controls on their accounts for spam kind of emails. And so you may have already had to do some of this stuff. And then restricting local administrative access. NDR, there is a vendor. They are on board. We're just trying to figure out the exact pricing model with that and how that we're going to pay for that. And so we're hoping maybe next month or June we have to answer for that for NDR. So coming soon. All right. That is all I have. Is there any questions before I turn this over to Josh about any of that? The documents should be in the handout section now, so please go look at that. That'll be the handouts for this, and then the handout for that. Let me make Josh the presenter. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, as Josh is getting set up, I'll introduce him. This is Josh Olshan. He is our SecOps lead here at TA. He started, was it maybe a month, 2 months ago now? Josh?
February 15th.
February, it has been 2 months. Yeah, there we go. So question here real quick before we link HB18 doesn't appear to be working. All right, I'll find a link and sit in the chat for HB18. That was for the TAA. So I have a question about funding for EDRs only through August 2025. That is true as of now. I think we do plan to resubmit a similar request to get funding. So it's undetermined, but I will say the cybersecurity initiatives or requests through the budget office have been looked at totally different than any other requests, and they have been funded quite a bit. So that's all I know. Any information regarding the EOP? There is information on that. So I've got a few questions on that. If you're not familiar, the Texas School Safety Center has been tasked, and they collect EOP having to do with emergency operation plans. I believe is what that stands for. Not really in my world, so like a lot of that stuff I don't understand, but I did kind of collaborate with them to create a cybersecurity annex, and that was really just a helpful document to help people that don't have any kind of cybersecurity policies, procedures, formalized in place. It was a good incident response plan and starting point. And so they have bundled in with kind of their ERP requirements some cybersecurity things. If you look at the list, as I understand, as I kind of got some clarification from them, that cybersecurity annex is not required, but there are some cybersecurity things in the EOP that are required. So the cybersecurity annex can help you fill out those, and as they collect those along with the EOPs, with more of the physical security stuff, and so that's the answer. So like the cybersecurity annex isn't required, but if you have that information already, you can submit that with your EOPs. I guess that is now required, as however they determine that with their statute. So that's the answer to that. And that's all I got. So Josh, it's all you.
All right. And thank you for that, Todd. You're able to see my presentation, correct? Can you just confirm?
Yes, correct. Sorry, I was muted.
All right. Awesome. All right. Hello, everybody. As Todd said, my name is Josh Olson. I'm the Cybersecurity Operations Team Lead here at TEA. And today I would just like to speak a little bit about browser security and go over some high-level threats, risks, and considerations that you may have for your organization. The agenda for today is first we're just going to do a little introduction about what we're talking about. Then we're going to go into some specific security considerations, some proposed mitigations, and then take some questions. As Todd already said, I am the Cyber Operations Security Team Lead. I have a couple degrees, and I also have some CVE credits to my name. These slides should be included in the attachment that Todd provided. So when we talk about web browser security, I mean, browsers by their very nature, they operate in a hostile environment, making them a prime target for threat actors, right? Today, we will delve into the crucial topic of browser security, focusing on why our web browsers represent an attractive attack surface and the inherent challenges they pose. Browsers are constantly communicating with remote, untrusted systems, right? I mean, they kind of have to do their job. And each time you visit a web page, it might connect to multiple servers and load content that could potentially be harmful. Vulnerabilities in browsers can significantly increase this risk. Unpatched vulnerabilities could mean that merely visiting a website controlled by a threat actor could compromise your enterprise data security in some way. The core function of a browser is to execute code from countless sources on the internet. This capability, while essential, exposes users to various risks as it processes code that might not always be secure or trustworthy. Web browsers, they interact very closely with system resources, from cameras and microphones to the file system itself. And again, if there are unpatched vulnerabilities, then there's the potential for exploitation that can extend outside the browser context. And then also too, in this day and age, I mean, browsers play a key role in identity, from session tokens to cookies, webmail. I mean, there's a lot of identity information flowing through the browser. And so here in this conversation, we're going to focus on 4 topics related to browser security. This is by no means the only considerations, but for time's sake, I think these 4 are probably worth the most attention. The first thing we're going to talk about is stored passwords and the problems inherent with allowing browsers to manage and store your passwords. We're going to also talk about patch management. And even though modern web browsers do allow for automatic updates, there's still a lot of legacy stuff floating around in our enterprises. And some of these older browsers may not auto-update. And on top of that, because they're old, they probably have quite a few serious vulnerabilities that can be exploited. We're going to talk about a lot, actually, about extensions. And in my opinion, extensions are one of the prime threats that browsers face. And we're going to dive pretty deeply into that. And then we're going to do a little bit of overview of enterprise management. And there's a lot more, like I said, that could be said in this area. But and not all of this may apply to every organization. And I also respect the fact that various enterprises may use different browsers. So I'm going to try to keep this as generic as possible. But for illustrative purposes, I may speak of a specific browser like Chrome, Edge, or Firefox. But in general, the points that I'm going to be trying to make here should apply to all browsers, though the terminology may differ slightly from browser to browser. For example, Edge and Chrome named their add-ons extensions, whereas Firefox names extensions add-ons. And so there could be some slight terminology, but in general, this should be generic and general enough to apply to most of the main browsers. So passwords. It is well known that threat actors target stored credentials in browsers. In fact, it is so well known that the MITRE ATT&CK framework has given this specific tactic and technique its own MITRE attack number. And in addition, the MITRE attack folks have listed 71 threat actors that are known to use the technique of targeting stored passwords in browsers as part of their operations. And so already, this is already something that is being pretty heavily attacked, right? And it just makes sense, right? I mean, you're going to go after where the data is, and if the data is in the browser, that's where it's the threat actors are going to focus. In addition, a lot of web browsers are very insistent that you store your information, and this is kind of a quality of life thing, because who likes to re-enter the same thing every time they try to log into their webmail, right? And so by default, most browsers are going to be very insistent. Hey, you know, we got this. We'll let us manage this, and we'll just, you know, autofill every time you come back. But this is a problem, as we're going to see. And I already spoke about, you know, autofill. When you have autofill, well, extensions can potentially see that data, and a lot of times the data could be in an unencrypted state while it's being entered into the forms. Visibility. You know, unlike other password storage solutions or identity storage solutions, you know, like Keeper or 1Password or whatnot, you know, there's not really good tools to log or track when identity information is being accessed in the browser, right? When somebody loads a password from their browser password manager, how do we track that, and how do we know when that's being accessed maliciously? And so, you know, that's one of the limitations that the browser password managers have. And then there's the whole issue around syncing data. You know, if you allow your users to log in with their identity, you know, their enterprise identity, and you enable syncing, and then they go and log in with their enterprise credentials on, let's say, their home computer, where are those credentials going to? I mean, how are their personal devices being managed? And more crucially, what's going to happen when a threat actor compromises that user account and logs into their computer and syncs their browser data, which is going to include exfiltrating, you know, potential identity information and stored password and login credentials. And this is not a hypothetical risk, as this ZDNet article explains, that this technique has been used by threat actors in real life, and this method of syncing browser data using Edge or Chrome or whatever its native services is very stealthy. It's very, very hard to detect. And when you throw malicious extensions into the mix, because extension data also gets synced. And so imagine a scenario, and this actually is directly from this ZDNet article. A malicious extension was set up to create various text-based fields in the extension. And essentially, the threat actor just started populating those keys, those text fields, with data they wanted to exfiltrate from the user's system. And because of syncing, that would then sync up with their controlled workstation, and now they have successfully exfilled the data off the endpoint to their computers. And like I said, this is very stealthy, because if you look at network logs, the way that the sync mechanism works, it's going through the Google infrastructure or the Microsoft infrastructure. So what you're going to see in the logs is just, you know, connections to like clients4.google.com, which is a legitimate domain name and is quite crucial for Google to work. And let's see. And speaking of extensions, what are they? I've mentioned them several times already. I like to think of extensions in this day and age as almost like apps from an app store that you get on your mobile device, right? I mean, they're small self-contained software programs that extend the functionality of a web browser, mostly to enhance user experience. So a lot of them are quality of life issues, but they integrate often with third parties, and they have the ability to modify the content and behavior of the browser itself and also the websites they visit. Here is the example of the Chrome extension store. And one thing to keep in mind is that Edge now is essentially just a Microsoft branded version of Chrome, right? And because of that, the extensions that work in Chrome also will work in Edge. And so this really increases the threat landscape, because not only do you have to worry about Edge extensions, but you also have to worry about Chrome extensions. The threat of extensions is really pervasive, in my opinion. I mean, these are just 3 news articles from relatively recently. Just like the Apple and Android App Store, these extension stores are constantly being hit with malicious extensions. The Google and Microsoft and Firefox are constantly having to remove malicious extensions. And though detecting the malicious extension is great, and their removal is good, detection is kind of it's already too late, right? I mean, like, in this last article, over 1 million devices were infected with a malicious VPN extension before it was detected. And so just because it's hosted by one of the big names and it's the official extension store, you really should not assume a trust there, right? You shouldn't assume that the extension is safe. And there's also many extensions that are lookalikes. A lot of extension authors will intentionally choose their graphics to mimic, a Google style or a Microsoft style. And this can be really confusing for users, especially if you just have these extension stores wide open and allow users to install and load whatever extensions they want. And so, let's take an extension here that has the ability to read and change website data. This is a really common permission that extensions will ask for. And there's a potential for unauthorized access to sensitive information, because the extension is able to read and modify the web page in ways that may not be readily apparent unless you examine that extension in the source code and see what it's doing. You really don't know what the extension is up to behind the scenes. They could introduce vulnerabilities and make things less secure, like cross-site scripting or embedding ads that lead to malicious content, or just the outright injection of malicious code itself. And they can compromise user privacy. Some of these extensions will read and record everything, all the websites you visit. And so, you may download an extension thinking it's just for this one site or this one product, but really it's there operating in the background, collecting all kinds of data. And again, unless you vet them, you're probably not going to know that. And so, again, this is very similar to the mobile app problem, right? You go to the mobile app store, you're going to find a ton of calculator apps. And a lot of these calculator apps are doing a lot more than just crunching numbers for their users. You take this bottom one, for example. I mean, I don't know who Omega Productions is. It says it's just it is browser calculator. Okay. And one of the problems with the Google and Edge extension stores is they do not make the permissions the extensions will inherit obvious. In fact, on the store themselves, the really only way that you can find out what the permissions are is to halfway install it, getting to the confirmation page. And then, you know, Chrome or Edge will throw up this banner that says, oh, hey, by the way, this extension, in this case, this calculator app, we're going to read and change, you know, or at least have the ability to read and change all your data on all websites. Now, does a calculator app, I mean, it's adding, you know, numbers together, you know, does it really need to be able to read and potentially change data on all websites that you visit? I don't know, this one seems pretty shady to me. And by no means are changing website content and data the only things that extensions can do. It is pretty overwhelming when you look at all the available permissions that extensions can possibly have access to. On this slide, I do contain a link to at least, you know, the Chrome app extension permission list. It's a lot, and these are just some of a few of the ones that I find, you know, extremely concerning from an information security point of view. I mean, extensions can access two-factor devices. They can read clipboard data at any time. And so whether you're engaging the extension or not, you could potentially have an extension that every time you copy something to your clipboard, that extension is reading it. Some extensions can capture the desktop, you know, take screenshots and whatnot. They can interact with the file system. Some can even interact with OAuth tokens. And, you know, of most concern is extensions that can intercept or modify web requests in progress. And this is where you really can get into the possibility of having user credentials compromised. And so with extensions, like a lot of times people think, you know, the app store, the extension store is where these are coming from. And though there are a lot of potentially malicious or, you know, at least gray extensions in that store, it's by no means the only way a user can be infected by a malicious extension. Malicious extensions can come from malware as part of an extended infection chain. You know, there is malware that will drop malicious extensions into the popular web browsers to take advantage of some of those covert channels. You know, browsers are trusted processes by and large, you know, and so if you have a process running in a browser, it's likely, at least initially, going to be overlooked. And so, like in this example that was analyzed by the SANS Internet Storm Center, the malware came from a phishing campaign. It installed a malicious program, and at some point during the infection chain, a malicious extension gets dropped into Chrome, where as part of its maliciousness, it sits there in the background intercepting all HTTP post requests, which is where your user credential data is likely going to be. And then, you know, surprise, surprise, it then takes what it intercepts and forwards that back to the threat actor. There's also the issue that, you know, some gray market browsers like Wave. I have seen Wave, or at least Wave imitators, as part of a persistence mechanism to guard against uninstalling. And I've seen them drop extensions into Edge and Chrome. And if you try to uninstall Edge, guess what? Your users start getting a lot of notifications that their browser needs to be updated. And if they go through that, well, they just reinstall Wave. And so there are quite a few ways here that malicious extensions can get on to an endpoint. Now, one of the ways that this possibly can be detected is that extensions have to be loaded. And using Chrome as an example, there are switches in the command line execution that possibly can give away that something malicious is going on. And if you have the SIM or the ability to search endpoint execution logs, I would highly recommend looking up the different extensions for the browsers that you operate in your environment and doing a search, seeing what load extensions are being ran. Like in this previous example for the malware, this was the command line that ended up loading that malicious extension. In addition, that malware would also disable certain file checks and disable the improved download protection, making it easier for the extension to do its malicious business. And just like permission sets that extensions can have, there are a ton of command line switches that browsers can be ran with. Not all of them may apply to every browser version, but I do include a link here. And what I really like about this site is that it links back to the source code for that. So you don't have to take this site's word at it. If you're curious, you can actually go to the Chromium source code for that switch and see exactly what it's doing. So another consideration, patch management. Browsers are critical assets. They interact with a lot of stuff, and vulnerabilities and 0 days in the browsers really put endpoints at risk, because again, we go back to the understanding that browsers have to interact with untrusted systems and code. And so if there is a remote code execution vulnerability or a command injection vulnerability or something like that in a browser, it really puts users and our data at risk. And this is not a problem, unfortunately, delegated to years past. I mean, just this month alone, Google has patched 4 Chrome 0 days, and a couple of those were, or at least had the potential to result in remote code execution. So this is something that is still very much a concern, and why we really need to be on top of our patch management game. This does tie into the enterprise part that I'm going to talk about in a second, but do you manage your web browsers, and as part of that management, do you enforce mandatory updates, and have you done an inventory of your enterprise to see what versions of browsers are out there? Because I think like Firefox, for example, I believe that before version 90, which is a pretty old version now, but before version 90, Firefox would not automatically update. And so if you still have any version of Firefox 90 laying around, it's possible that it'll never update unless you go in and rectify or remediate that installation. And also keep in mind that automatic updates does not mean right away. Depending on how you have things configured or set up, Google may release a patch but for various reasons, it may not roll out that instant. And so do your users know how to check for browser updates? Do you give them the ability to manually update? Now, I've seen some enterprises disable that feature for one reason or another. And, you know, again, that's going to be up to your organizational risk tolerance and whatnot. But I would argue that giving the users the ability to manually go in and hit that update button is probably a good thing, especially in a situation where some critical 0-day gets released and you just want users updating as quick as possible, and you don't want to wait for the automatic process to run its course.
Hey, Josh, I've got a question here before you get too far along, if you don't care.
Yep.
Someone's asking about extensions. They have the same functionality on Mac OS?
So, you know, I'm gonna be perfectly upfront. My experience with Mac is limited, and so the most honest answer I would have at this point is I would assume so. You know, but I'll be honest, I have not dealt with a lot with Mac or Safari, so I wouldn't want to give a definitive answer because I'm not completely sure.
All right, and one more question, and I feel personally attacked by this question, by the way. What would be your recommendation for how many tabs should be open at one time? Is this even a concern?
Oh yeah, if you're using Chromium-based products, I mean, how much RAM do you have? I mean, you know, yeah, I mean tabs, but you know, that is actually, you know, it's kind of funny, but you know, and I didn't include it in this presentation just because for the sake of time, but there are threats that involve kind of like hidden tabs or hidden windows where things can be running in the background without the user's knowledge, and so a lot of malicious ad services will use these techniques, and so so yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, if you have one window open, one tab open, but you go to your task manager and you see like, you know, 30 instances of Firefox or Chrome running, you might want to kill some processes and reboot. But getting back to the enterprise management of things. Now, of course, every enterprise is going to be different, you know, right? And that includes, you know, what your risk tolerance are and your threat landscape that you face. And even within an enterprise, you know, one department's threat landscape and risk tolerance may be different than another department. So by no means am I advocating a one size fits all. But the point here is to consider what can be done and at least understanding the options that are available when it comes to managing your browsers, and then, you know, to ensure that your browsers are being managed consistent with your enterprise's security standards across the board, whatever those may be. And do you allow users to install other browsers like Brave, Opera, DuckDuckGo? And if so, how are you managing the security of those browsers? Are you allowing extensions to be installed? Are you allowing passwords to be saved? You know, and I'll be honest, you know, like Brave and Opera and DuckDuckGo, I don't know if they have ADMX files. I don't know if they can be centrally managed. You know, those are kind of some of the other browsers, not the big three. And so this is just stuff to think about, is that, you know, if you're doing a really good job managing, say, Firefox, right, but you allow users to install Brave, well, those users who install and use Brave are not getting any of the protections that you work so hard for to enforce onto Firefox. And here I just include some resources on information and links on how Chrome and Edge and Firefox, you know, can be managed, say, like in Intune. Chrome and Edge, because they're essentially the same thing now, are natively managed and can be natively managed in Intune, no problem. Firefox can be, but it requires the adding of an ADMX file to Intune, but it is possible. And so now some proposed mitigations, and we've already hinted at some of these, right? I would highly recommend that your organization and enterprise create a list of approved browsers and enforce that list. Once you have a list of approved browsers, go ahead and manage them. Define what the security controls and the security posture is going to be. And again, this doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all. Maybe some departments should be allowed to install extensions because of a lower risk, whereas maybe other departments for higher risk shouldn't be allowed to install extensions. Auto update. Make sure that auto update is enforced and that users cannot opt out. If anything, to take away, this would be a big one. And disable password managers. I am a fan of password managers in general, something like 1Password or Keeper, but they are specific built applications to manage passwords, right? Browsers are not really that. And so, if you're going to have password managers in your environment, that's fine. But be sure that they're managed, and I would argue that the browser being that is probably not ideal. And then monitor through your SIM or whatever tools that you have. Monitor for those switches. Monitor for extensions being loaded. Monitor your web traffic. And just to kind of get insights as to what your endpoints are doing. And then, this is perhaps one of the most controversial ones that I've run across, but I do advocate, that many organizations deny extensions by default, right? And so you create a whitelist of approved extensions, and those are the extensions that users can install. Trying to have a block list of denied extensions is a game of whack-a-mole. And the fact of the matter, in an enterprise setting, there's really only going to be, once you do an inventory, there's going to be a finite number of extensions that your users really need to use to get business done. And if you identify those extensions and build an allow list around those, you really mitigate a lot of the threats posed by malicious extensions. And what you can help while with doing that is when you're looking at your endpoints and collecting an inventory, this site is great. CRX, and I assume it's cavator.io, however you pronounce it, it's like a virus total for extensions. And to use this site, the first thing you're going to want to do is find the extension ID. And you can do that if it's an extension that's in one of the stores. You can go and find that extension on the store. And here I have posted where the ID is for the different, the 3 common browsers. Unfortunately, I'll just say this one does not do Safari. Right now, it's only set up to do Edge, Chrome, and Firefox, which is why I have those here. But once you get that ID, you go ahead and plug it into the search bar, select the browser that this extension is for. In this case, it was Chrome, but you could also use Firefox or Edge as relevant. And then you hit the submit button. And what you get is just a wealth of data. For example, on this extension, you can see that even though this kind of looks like a Google theme, I'll just go ahead and tell you now this extension is not developed by Google, and there is no privacy policy for this extension, which might be concerning. You can also, for as many versions as this tool has scanned for, you can actually go and view the source code of the extension, because extensions are really nothing more than compressed folders, and they normally contain JavaScript and some manifest and config files and some other things. But the thing is, I mean, they're essentially compressed folders, and that means viewing the source code is very easy, and this tool collects that and archives the source code. So if you really want to get into the weeds, you could look up this extension and find out and figure out exactly what this extension is going to do to your browser. Another section of this tool lists the permissions this extension can or has the possibility to invoke. So for example, this extension, it essentially allows this extension to read all the cookies within the web browser. It also has the ability to read and alter web requests, though it apparently is optional. But I don't know how you would manage that at the enterprise level. The user might be able to disable that, but I don't believe that there is going to be a GPO that says, with this specific extension, disable this specific permission. I don't believe that functionality exists. And then you can see what sites this extension will communicate with. And so in this particular extension, a lot of these domains look pretty legitimate. It's a Google, it interacts with Google, so it would make sense that, it would interact with Google. But right here, we see that, they are interacting with some kind of ad, probably content aggregator, metrics type site. And because from the previous slide, we know that this extension has the ability to interact with web requests and cookies, I would venture to guess what this extension is doing in the back end is shipping off a lot of data to whatever this ad mob site is. And so in conclusion, here are just some other considerations that you may want to think about. I would consider prohibiting users from clearing history, not cache cookies or sessions or store, those are important and users should be allowed to clear those. But in Chrome and Edge and Firefox, you are able to configure, GPO or Intune configuration policies such that users can clear these things, but not touch their web history. And the reason for that is, in my experience, well-meaning or otherwise, I have had users routinely clear their web history, and it made investigating incidences a lot more challenging in certain circumstances. Having that web history there can be extremely valuable. So again, something to consider. Consider disabling web development tools for those users who have no business to use them. In some cases, the web development tools make side-loading extensions, especially extensions that are dropped by malware, a lot easier because having the web development tools enabled allows the browser to kind of bypass a lot of the signing and certificate requirements that are typically required. And so, if Jim in accounting has no need to engage with web dev tools in the browser, why allow them to use that? Again, something to consider. And then, regardless of what browsers your enterprise approves, the security team really should understand the features and the security implications of those features for every web browser the enterprise chooses to support, and then tune the security baselines accordingly. And lastly, do not think of these things as the end. All of these things are really just intended to be yet another layer in a broader defense in depth strategy. And so, disabling extensions is not going to make your endpoints or your browser secure. It may make it relatively more secure, but again, this is about a defense in depth, right? And so it really needs to be viewed in that context. And with that, are there any questions?
All right, right on time, Josh.
Oh,
No questions that have popped up, but thank you, everyone. And just a reminder too, I did put links in the chat. So if you were looking for, apparently the survey had the wrong link, and then something maybe with the HB18. So if you're looking for those are in the chat. Those will get updated when we post this online, though. So, all right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next month. If that's it, we appreciate you. And thank you, Josh.